Well, on the national parks that we have for example, on Staten Island, we have Fort Wadsworth, Miller Field, and Great Kills Park. It's all part of Gateway. Now, on these federal parks, there are law enforcement rangers. They have guns, they have weapons, and they carry their badges. So anytime they pull somebody over, if somebody is speeding or is parked in the wrong place or doing something wrong, they'll take their driver's license and they'll call the dispatch center. And so I'll be sitting there, and we'll use detective terminology. We'll run a make on the person using their driver's license. I'll determine whether the person has a valid driver's license, and I'll enter into federal government as well as all 50 states have a criminal database. All of their most personal information. In the event you were going to do an ID theft or a credit fraud, it would all be displayed right there for you. If that was your intent, you have their social security number, their addresses, their aliases, if they went bankrupt, where they've lived in the past 5 years. I found reports, official reports, that are never to be erased. They're called IMARS reports. I can't remember what IMARS stands for. Incident reporting something or other. But these reports are never to be deleted. And I found reports attributed to myself while working at Fort Wadsworth in the dispatch center, one of which actually had me listed as being arrested. So these were co-workers inside the emergency dispatch center, which is where the New York City Marathon will kick off in a week from now or 2 weeks from now. I can steal it. A dispatcher can steal it. The social security numbers, and that's what you need if you're going to do a crime. There had been a rash of inter-employee violence in the past 2 years that I know of. I know of a manager and a worker with the roads and grounds crew that almost got into a fisticuff situation while they were at Miller Field. And my supervisor, a beautiful guy, an Italian guy from Staten Island, there was a gentleman that I believe had some problems mentally, maybe PTSD. But this man was in Iraq, who had an altercation with my last supervisor, my prior supervisor, prior to taking a job as a public safety dispatcher. And he told me himself that many people in his battalion were killed in Iraq, and that he was struggling with it mentally. In any event, the last assignment I had was as a public safety dispatcher. And what I'm reporting to you today and to the community, because you are supposed to see something and say something. That's important in our country. See something, say something. But in my case, it led to my being dismissed. And I reported this to Dan Donovan. So here's what I'm reporting. After I believe I was placed under a surveillance for making a single trip to the Trump Towers campaign call center, I started noticing these reports being prepared inside the dispatch center, claiming that making it look like they originated from Carl LARSON. That wasn't true. Somebody was preparing these reports to make it look like I was incompetent. There was a co-worker inside the dispatch center that displayed anger at me several times during the course of the workday, jumping up from the chair, shouting, and he did this in the presence of witnesses. And unfortunately for myself, after the second or third time, I started going back at him. I had no intention of engaging in combat with him, but I started to tell him, calm down, sit down, don't shout, don't raise your voice. And managers would come in from the other unit that was housed in the building where the dispatch center is and try to break it up. The threat is that this particular guy, I believe, was hired under nepotism. He knew somebody, because it was all being covered up that this guy, he told me, first of all, he was obsessed with firearms. He had pictures all over federal government computers of himself standing there with heavy machine guns, which is irregular. It's not, I don't think they permit that. They don't permit certain things. I mean, you can't have a prayer on your computer in the federal workplace. But the thing is that he did display anger at me. He was on medications from the VA. He had violent tendencies, and I reported this, and it fell on deaf ears. So what happened to me when I reported that? The chief ranger, who I had never met, comes around. I meet him for the first time. 5 minutes after I met him, he exposes his firearm to me and his weapon. He had a 45 or a Glock on him, and he looks me dead in the eye. I'm a practically, excuse me, I'm practically a complete stranger. I just met this guy for the very first time, the chief ranger at Fort Wadsworth, and he goes, "Are you afraid?" You know, I felt like taking that pistol off him and smashing him over the forehead with it. Well, I brought this information to Congressman Dan Donovan's staff when I was working. I mean, they should have looked into it at that point. Why don't somebody officially tell me that these are erroneous comments, or my conclusions and my assertions are inaccurate or false? Nobody's told me that. This case is being reviewed by the U.S. Office of Independent Counsel, and it was covered up by the FBI. I know that for sure because I reported part of it to the New York Cyber Security Command, and they told me, in fact, the FBI intervened to keep it, the computer end of it, the unauthorized use of federal computers, squashed, and that's why it's important. I appreciate that you gave me a time to come on the air today to tell the people, to tell the public, at least I saw something and I said something.